Hello everyone, good evening. Glad you're here. While we wait for a few others to join us, I just wanted to make a correction. This afternoon, if you watched my curating tea time, I showed you this wonderful folk art carving of a Meyer from Poland, and it was done by a folk artist in the 60s. And it was a gift to me by Milton and Ingrid Rose. And when I looked over my broadcast, it didn't sound like Milton because I hesitated, but I did correct it and it didn't pick up. So it was Milton and Ingrid Rose. She's a wonderful paper conservator and was in Poland in the 60s and consulted with the museum there on their works on paper. So you can take a look at this on the tea time today. It's posted. And then I also want to remind you that tomorrow for tea we're going to do something very, very, very special. We're going to do tea time for children, toys of endearment. And we're going up, if we can do it, with our broadcast up to the children's wing. And I will show you and share with you some toys and some things on the way up, including some paintings. So tonight we're going to start reading in chapter 8. Last night we found everyone at dinner with Mr. Beaver. And Mr. Beaver, at the end of the dinner, pushing away his empty beer mug and pulling up his cup of tea, he said, "If you just wait until I get my pipe lit," which mine was, it's just went out, "and going nicely, why now we can get to business. It's snowing again," he added, cocking his eye to the window. Excuse me. "That's all the better because it means we shan't have any visitors. If anyone should be following or trying to follow you, he won't find any tracks." That's a really good thing. So that's where we left off last night. So tonight we're going to talk what happened after dinner. Pretty exciting. "And now," said Lucy, "do please tell us what's happened to Mr. Tumnus." Remember last night they were asking about Mr. Tumnus and his house was destroyed. "Ah, that's bad," said Mr. Beaver, shaking his head. "Really bad. That's a very, very bad business. There's no doubt he was taken off by the police. I got that from a bird who saw it done." "But where's he been taken to?" asked Lucy. "Well, they were heading northward when they were last seen. And we all know what that means." "No, we don't," said Susan. Mr. Beaver shook his head in a very gloomy fashion. "I'm afraid it means they were taking him to her house," he said. "But what'll they do to him, Mr. Beaver?" gasped Lucy. "Well," said Mr. Beaver, "you can't exactly say for sure. But there's not many taken in there that ever comes out again. Statues. All full of statues, they say it is. In the courtyard and up the stairs and in the hall. People she's turned into stone." "But Mr. Beaver," said Lucy, "can't we, we must do something to save him. It's too dreadful and it's all on my account." "I doubt you'd save him if you could, dearie," said Mrs. Beaver. "But you've no chance of getting into that house against her will or ever coming out alive." "Couldn't we have some stratagem?" said Peter. Couldn't we dress up something or pretend to be or peddlers or anything? Or watch till she's gone out? Or, oh, hang it all, there must be some way. This fawn saved my sister at his own risk, Mr. Beaver. We just can't leave him to have that done to him." "It's no good, son of Adam," said Mr. Beaver. "No good of your trying." of all people. But now that Aslan is on the move, Oh yes, tell us about Aslan, said several voices all at once. For once again that strange feeling, like the first signs of spring, like good news had come over them. It was a wonderful new feeling. Who is Aslan? Asked Susan. Aslan, said Mr. Beaver. Why, don't you know? He's the king. He's the lord of the whole wood. But not often here, you understand. Never in my time or my father's time. But the word has reached us that he's coming back. He's in Narnia at this very moment. He'll settle the White Queen all right. It is he, not you, that will save Mr. Tumnus. Lord love you, son of Adam, what a simple thing to say, answered Mr. Beaver with a great laugh. Turn him into stone? If she can stand on her 2 feet and look him in the face, it'll be the most she can do, and more than I expect of her. Oh no, he'll put all to rights, as it says in the old rhyme in these parts. Here's the rhyme. Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death. And when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. You'll understand when you see him. But shall we see him? Asked Susan. Why, daughter of Eve, that's why I brought you here for. I'm to lead you where you shall meet him, said Mr. Beaver. Is he a man's? Asked Lucy. Aslan a man? Said Mr. Beaver sternly. Certainly not. I tell you, he is the king of the wood, and son of the great emperor beyond the sea. Don't you know he is the king of the beasts? Aslan is a lion, the great lion. Oh, said Susan, I thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I should feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. That you will, dearie, and no mistake, said Mrs. Beaver. If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they either are braver than most or else just silly. Have you ever felt brave, and have you ever felt silly? I have. It's kind of embarrassing sometimes, especially if you aren't as brave as you think you are, or if you are, you're proud, and if you feel silly, you feel embarrassed. Then he isn't safe, said Lucy. Safe, said Mr. Beaver. Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. I'm longing to see him, said Peter, even if I do feel frightened when it comes to the point. That's right, son of Adam, said Mr. Beaver, bringing his big paw down on the table with a crash. Boom! Made all the cups and saucers rattle. And so you shall. Word has been sent that you are to meet him tomorrow, if you can, at the stone table. Where's that? Said Lucy. Where's the stone table? I'll show you, said Mr. Beaver. It's down the river, a good step from here. I'll take you to it. So he's going to go along with them. How wonderful. But meanwhile, what about poor Mr. Tumnus? Said Lucy. The quickest way you can help him is by going to meet Aslan, said Mr. Beaver. Once he's with us, then we can begin doing things. Not that we don't need you too, for that's another of the old rhymes. When Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. So things must be drawing near their end now. He's coming, and you've come. We've heard of Aslan coming into these parts before, long ago, nobody can say when. But there's never been any of your race here before. That's what I don't understand, Mr. Beaver, said Peter. I mean, isn't the witch herself human? She'd like us to believe it, said Mr. Beaver, and it's on that she bases her claim to be queen. But she's no daughter of Eve. She comes of your father Adam's, here Mr. Beaver bows, your father Adam's first wife. Her they called Lilith, and she was one of the jinn, Jinn, for you, everyone listening. That's what she comes from on one side, and on the other side she comes of giants. No, there isn't a drop of real human blood in the witch. That's why she's all bad through, Mr. Beaver, said Mrs. Beaver. True enough, Mrs. Beaver, replied he. There may be two views about humans, meaning no offense to the present company. But there's no two views about the things that look like human and aren't. I've known good dwarfs, said Mrs. Beaver. So have I. Now you come to speak of it, said her husband. But precious few, and they were the only ones least like men. But in general, take my advice. When you meet anything that's going to be human and isn't yet, or used to be human once and isn't now, or ought to be human and isn't, you keep your eyes on it and feel for your hatchet. And that's why the witch is always on the lookout for any humans in Narnia. She's been watching for you this many a year, and if she knew there were 4 of you, she'd be even more dangerous. She'd be more dangerous still. What's that to do with it? Asked Peter. Because of another prophecy down at Cair Paravel. That's the castle on the seacoast down at the mouth of this river, which ought to be the capital of the whole country, if all was it should be. Down at Cair Paravel there are 4 thrones. And it's a saying in Narnia, time out of mind, that when 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve sit on the 4 thrones, then it will be the end. And not only of the White Witch's reign, but of her life. And that is why we had to be so cautious as we came along. For if she knew about you 4, your lives wouldn't be worth a shake of my whiskers. All of the children had been attending so hard to what Mr. Beaver was telling them that they had noticed nothing else for a long time. Then during a moment of silence that followed his last remark, Lucy suddenly said, I say, where's Edmund? There was a dreadful pause, and then everyone began asking, who saw him last? How long has he been missing? Is he outside? And then they all rushed to the door and looked out. The snow was falling thickly and steadily. The green ice of the pool had vanished under a thick white blanket. And from where the little house stood in the center of the dam, you could hardly see the other bank. Out they went, plunging well over their ankles into the soft new snow, and went round the house in every direction. Edmund! Edmund! They called till they were hoarse. The silently falling snow seemed to muffle their voices, and there was not even an echo in answer. How perfectly dreadful, said Susan, as they last came back in despair. Oh, how I wish we'd never come. What on earth were we to do, Mr. Beaver, said Peter. Do, said Mr. Beaver, who was always putting on his snow boots. Do? We must be off at once. We haven't a moment to spare. We better divide into 4 search parties, said Peter, and all go in different directions. Whoever finds him must come back here at once. And search parties, son of Adam, said Mr. Beaver. What for? Why, to look for Edmund, of course. "There's no point in looking for him," said Mr. Beaver. "What do you mean?" said Susan. He can't be far away yet, and we've got to find him. What do you mean when you say there's no use looking for him?" "The reason there's no use looking," said Mr. Beaver, is that we already know where he's gone." Everyone stared in amazement. "Don't you understand?" said Mr. Beaver. "He's gone to her, to the White Witch. He has betrayed us all." "Oh, surely, oh, really?" said Susan. "He couldn't have done that." "Can't he?" said Mr. Beaver, looking very hard at the three children. And everything they wanted to say died on their lips, for each felt suddenly quite certain inside that that was exactly what Edmund had done. "But will he know the way?" said Peter. "He's been in this country before," asked Mr. Beaver. He's been in this country before," asked Mr. Beaver. "Why has he ever been here alone?" Has he ever been here alone?" "Yes," said Lucy, almost in a whisper. "I'm afraid he has." "And did he tell you that he'd done or who he'd met?" "Well, no, he didn't," said Lucy. "Then mark my words," said Mr. Beaver. "He's already met the White Witch and joined her side, and been told where she lives. I didn't like to mention it before, he being your brother and all, but the moment I set eyes on that brother of yours, I said to myself, treacherous." "Had he the look of one who has been with the witch and eaten her food?" "You can always tell them, if you lived long in Narnia, something about their eyes." "All the same," said Peter in a rather choking sort of voice, "we still have to go and look for him. He is our brother after all, even if he's rather a little beast. And he's only a kid." "Go to the witch's house," said Mrs. Beaver. "Don't you see it's the only chance of saving either him or yourselves, is to keep away from her?" "How do you mean?" said Lucy. "Why, all she wants is to get all four of you." She's thinking all the time of those 4 thrones at Cair Paravel. "Once you were all 4 inside her house, her job would be done. And then there'd be 4 new statues in her collection before you had time to speak. But she'll keep him alive as long as he's the only one she's got, because she wants to use him as a decoy, as bait to catch the rest of you with." "Oh, no one can help us," wailed Lucy. "Only Aslan," said Mr. Beaver. "We must go on and meet him. That's our only chance now." "It seems to me, my dears," said Mrs. Beaver, "that it's very important to know just when he slipped away. How much he can tell her depends on how much he heard. For instance, had we started talking of Aslan before he left? If not, then we may do very well, for she won't know that Aslan has come to Narnia, or that we are meeting him, and we will be quite off her guard as far as that is concerned." "I don't remember his being here when we were talking about Aslan," began Peter. Then Lucy interrupted him. "Oh, yes, he was," she said miserably. "Don't you remember? It is he who asked whether the witch couldn't turn Aslan into stone, too." "So he did, by Jove," said Peter. "Just the sort of thing he would say, too." "Worse and worse," said Mr. Beaver. "And the next thing is this. Was he still here when I told you that the place for meeting Aslan was the stone table?" And of course no one knew the answer to this question. "Because if he was," continued Mr. Beaver, "then she'll simply sledge down in that direction and get between us and the stone table and catch us on our way down. In fact, we shall be cut off from Aslan. Oh dear. But That isn't what she'll do first, said Mrs. Beaver. Not if I know her. The moment that Edmund tells her that we're all here, she'll set out to catch us this very night. And if he'd been gone about a half an hour, she'll be here in about another 20 minutes. You're right, Mrs. Beaver, said her husband. We must all get away from here. There's not a moment to lose. This ends the reading of the 8th chapter. Tomorrow we read chapter 9, In the Witch's House. It's pretty exciting. I hope you can join us tomorrow night. Thank you all for coming, and I just want to repeat, tomorrow we're going to have a special trip up to the children's wing, up by the attic in this very old house. I don't have upstairs, downstairs servants, but I do have a children's wing, and I would love for you to come visit me tomorrow. And again, my technical advisor, Nathan Mitchell, and my daughter, Abigail, are my producer and advisor, and we're still testing whether we can broadcast up there. I think we can. If not, I will bring what I call toys of endearment down to where you can see them and we can talk about them. You have a wonderful evening, and hug your parents, and your mom and dad hug each other, and go out in the yard and see the sunset. It's a beautiful night tonight, and it's warmer out. Tomorrow's going to be even warmer, but may start having rain by tomorrow night where I am out in the country. So lots of love to all of you, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. God bless.